Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Training Magazine Network. My name is Sandy Masters. I'm here with Scott Province, who is the Senior Learning Strategist at ELB Learning. Today's topic, fail to learn how to grow your organization through trial, error, and play. Let's have some fun today. This event is sponsored by ELB Learning. And again, my name is Sandy Masters. I'll be your producer today. We hope you can join us tomorrow. We have Tim Hagen coaching for self awareness for better learning. And also, we have Kendra Lee and Barry Robb for how to keep your B2B marketing emails out of spam in 2024. Oh gosh, and another bonus session with Todd Davis, navigating difficult conversations, turning tension into progress. You can get the details of everything on our calendar by clicking on the link on the screen or just going to trainingmagnetwork.com/calendar. Get signed up for all of these free events, the benefits of being a member of Training Mag Network. A special thank you to our sponsor today, ELB Learning. And they have provided a special package. If you're just joining and haven't checked out this link in chat, you can learn all about the additional member benefits that they have provided, including a periodic table of instructional design, 10 e-learning game tips, amped up PowerPoint kits. And if you decide to upgrade to Membership Plus at Training Magazine Network, you can get access to an heirloom course, a Lectora showcase. These items have a value of over $2,000. They're even providing a game board with 10 e-learning game tips for instructional designers. So check it out at the link in chat. Again, special thank you to ELB Learning for being our sponsor. Having said that, Scott is here and he's going to be doing a little desktop sharing. Scott, everyone give a wave to Scott. How are you doing?
Hello. Thank you so much, Sandy,
Hey.
for having me. You can hear me okay, it sounds like?
I can. Just go ahead
All
and share
right.
your screen and we'll be good to
Perfect.
go.
I will share my screen now. It's so great
It's
to
good.
see everyone on the screen, and really excited to be here. Excited to get the conversation going, and I know we've got lots to cover and talk about. So, yeah, like Sandy mentioned, my name is Scott Province, and I am excited to talk through all of the different ins and outs and tips and tricks for gamification, learning and development, everything under the sun that we care to talk about and explore within those areas. And looks like I can see everyone okay. Just like Sandy had mentioned, please do put questions in the chat as we look through things. Happy to just interrupt myself and jump into
Mhm.
questions as people have them, and excited to get started. Um, so I know that you've probably seen this a bit in the pre-reading material that we had on websites as people were signing up for the course. But I've got all sorts of objectives and thoughts on my mind to go through today. This is a high-level overview of them, but I don't want this to be necessarily the only things that we talk about. So if you're looking through this list now and seeing, let's talk about failure rates and how that relates to learning. Let's talk about game-based thinking. Let's talk about how we can apply this to business metrics. And the idea of combining failure and business metrics, I think, is a nerve-wracking situation for most. So I'm eager to dive into that, and then we'll leave with some tips for gamification. But as you look through this list, if there are other things that you really want to cover today, talk through, please do throw them in the chat, raise your hand, throw them out there, and we'll make sure we get to those too. I want this to be as beneficial as you want it to be. Um, anything burning, anything urgent that I'm missing, Sandy, before I jump in?
I think you're doing great. I'll be sure to let
Okay,
you know if we
perfect.
have any questions as we go along.
All right. Well, we're going to start actually with a little pop quiz to get people up and about and engaged with their brains. And so I know Sandy's going to put this up on the screen for folks, but I'll give you the grounding for this question. When's the best time, in your opinion, for a multiple choice test? And I've given you four options here. What do you think, in your experience in creating courses, attending courses? What's the best time for multiple choice test? Is it at the start of the course only? Is it at both the start and the end? Is it only at the end of the course, or is it never? I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about how you would answer that.
So it looks like the winner by a large margin is at the start and the
At the start
end.
and the end of the course. Yeah. Pretty typical, I would say, in terms of how I see this show up in most of my responses here. So I will use this at the at the start test. I didn't even mention there yet. Maybe that was a little bit of a hint of when I typically do it. But the reason I use that multiple choice little pop quiz intro is it gives me a chance to talk a bit about my own background and how I came to uh, my position now, the research that I did for my own book. But it was interesting when I think about my learning and development career over 15, 20 years now. I actually began my career in teaching college courses at the University of Washington, and was specifically in the English department there. And within the English department, everything is interpretive and open ended, and you never use multiple choice tests. And so when I started my course. Design work. Never did any multiple choice tests that I could possibly imagine. When I got into teaching in other departments, I think we got the more typical educational experience. So teaching in history departments, teaching in other departments, we would typically do lectures week over week. And then at the end of the semester, we would have that final exam. And yeah, there'd be some essays, but there'd be some multiple choice tests as well. Then spent 12, 15 years just designing, leading L&D teams in the corporate world. And that's probably where we have that, whatever it was, 80+% of respondents coming in saying, yep, you do a pre-post, you do a test at the start, you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you do a test at the end, and that way you can measure the delta there. What people might not be what people might not be used to seeing for themselves is this idea of an at the start option. And so what does that mean? And we're going to look into that today and explore what can happen with at the start tests. And as I started researching the book that I wrote a couple years back, Fail to Learn, I realized that there's actually a lot of benefits to this concept of at the start tests. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about to kick things off here is what happens to our brains when we are given a test right at the beginning. Maybe we don't do so well because we have no idea what we're supposed to be answering, and how that changes our learning process and what we can take away and apply to our daily work design environments to help create better learning experiences. Alrighty, so here's a version of an at the start test, probably a little harder than the one I just gave you. Imagine you are a pilot in training, and before you even get any reading material, any grounding on what you're supposed to be doing, you get sat down and you get shown this cockpit and then asked, "What is this panel telling you?" Do we have any pilots in the audience here? I have no idea what this panel was telling me, and so apologies if my
I
options here
see
are
I
not giving
see
you
like
anything.
there's no temperature, there's like 0 readings on the flow meter. I'm kinda
Hmm.
concerned. Are we, like, already
Do we bail
dead?
out now? Yeah, yeah. I have no idea.
Uh,
What was interesting is as I dove into my research for this Fail to Learn book, I learned about these things called perceptual learning models, PLMs, and it's kind of a version of an at the start test. They were actually created way back in late '60s, early '70s, recognizing that when you're just training your perceptions, that perceptual learning is very self-regulated in the sense that you are modifying things without necessarily any external reinforcements. You're just adapting and adjusting on the fly. In the 1980s, a cognitive scientist named Philip Kellman used perceptual learning models to evaluate how well it could teach people, like pilots. And so sat down and did a study where pilots were given these types of readouts before any sort of basic training, and just went through a lot of these questions. And so they would just guess, this looks like a banking turn with no concept, and get a right or a wrong, and then get another panel with another set of questions. What Kelman found is that novice pilots who spent 1 hour in a perceptual learning model could read panels as well as pilots with 1,000 hours of actual flight time. And this should get us really thinking about what is happening in this sort of at the start, throw you into the deep end environment that is creating such an impactful learning experience. And so this is really what I wanted to start looking at when I got into and interested in this concept of failing and learning, and setting the stage for getting really comfortable with failure. And when you all think about getting comfortable with failure, maybe the things that come to mind for you are those like motivational posters, right? And so we've probably seen, many of us have seen the Wayne Gretzky quote: "You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take." And yeah, that's great, motivational, sure. I would actually argue that this probably is not going far enough in getting us comfortable with failure. We don't need just 100% of the shots we don't take. We actually need a little bit uh, more discomfort than that. So maybe we need a different poster from Wayne Gretzky. I would propose something like this: you only make 17% of the shots that you do take. Also by Wayne Gretzky. Actually, not really. Wayne Gretzky never said this one, but if you take his career goals and you divide it by the number of career shots taken, you actually do get an 83% failure rate. And to me, this is way more interesting than the 100% of the shots that you don't take. It's because we're actually looking at one of the greatest hockey players out there that ever played, and the amount of failure that he actually experienced in his daily life. All right, how we doing, Sandy? Checking in on the chat. Am I missing any questions so far?
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah,
All right.
it's like we need to have a new mantra. Failure's okay. Failure's
Exactly.
okay.
Okay
And
to
get
fail.
everyone to believe that failure's okay.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Well, good. Well, I want to throw this back to you now. I know that I've already given you one pop quiz, but I want to engage you, just kind of your brains on another level here. I want to see how much failure you expect to experience when approaching a project, and we'll keep this pretty vague. Let's say you could apply this question to the project you're working on. Maybe a new role, if you're starting a new role, a new organization. How much failure do you expect to experience in that role? And I want to just kind of keep my eyes on the chat and see what's coming through here. Um, but think about be honest with yourself. How much failure do you expect to experience when you're starting a new project? We've got a really
Ooh,
cool. Wow, look
big
at this!
range.
Look at this range here. Yeah, I see everything from 5%,
Mhm.
10%, all the way up to 95%,
I see
20%, 10%.
100.
100%. This is very cool. I'm not going to call it
Uh,
individual names on this recording here, but yeah, very
mhm.
impressive. 0%. Yeah, so we've literally got everything. We've got everything from 0% all the way up to 100%. How cool is that? Um, so before I reveal anything on this timeline here, actually that's not true. I guess I can reveal something really quickly. I will reveal the Wayne Gretzky, which is probably what right in the middle here. Yeah. So I put 83% failure rate for Wayne Gretzky's shot right there. But I'll pause before I reveal any more. And look back at this chat. This is a really amazing range. And yeah, we have some
Mhm.
qualitative answers as well. Depends on the project, certainly. Depends on my experience. Yep. But look at this range here. I'll ask two questions for this. If you see someone on this chat who is listed a higher percentage of failure rate than you have, uh, they might be onto something. And I love encouraging outreach and cross collaborations. Reach out to them. What have they figured out in their career, in their project, that gets them recognizing that the more I'm failing here, the more breadth of experience, breadth of learning, breadth of success that I might expect. Um, these we got some good smart people in the room, I think, that are willing and able to
Mhm.
put up this high percentage. The other question I will ask of you is, for everyone besides those who put maybe zero, uh, look back at your own number and think about what have I learned, or what have I allowed myself that got me to this number. So if I put 20% in, what have I told myself about that 20% of failure that I expect that makes it okay? And are those messages that I can double down on, uh, relate to more, encourage in others, and maybe work my way towards getting that number up? So some things to think about. Here's some other data points on our timeline here. Anyone own a Dyson vacuum?
I
Um,
do.
Me
I
too.
have my dog is named Dyson
Oh, there you go. There you go. After James Dyson. Very
after
cool.
James Dyson.
All right. Well, you might know this then. For those that don't, James Dyson famously went through over 5,000 prototypes trying to make his
Oh,
invent the technology for his bagless vacuum cleaner. I think it was 5,127 failed prototypes.
wow.
So if you again do the math there, that's a 99.99% failure ratio. Thomas Edison has a great quote about, well, I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And in my researching this, it sounds like he was connecting this to a project on some sort of battery experiment. But again, 10,000 to 1, that's also a ratio I've heard about the chances of a startup company making it to kind of that $1 billion valuation. But everything from Edison to modern day startups, failure ratio of 10,000 to 1, 99.99999%. Yes, these are career defining projects that we're talking about, but think about how different these failure ratios are compared to what we do in typical training environments, right? Which is 80% pass rate. I know you're new at this, but I got to get you certified. I got to get you out on the floor. I need to have something defensible in my own mind. So I need you to be hitting that 80% mark. And that's challenging, right? I mean, we're kind of sending two different messages here, that some of the greatest minds are the ones that fail all the time, but when you are going through this new program, this new process, I expect you to fail the least. And so that's a challenging thing, and hopefully something that gives us pause. Rightfully so, I think we should be, as an industry, looking at these different ratios and saying, why are we so imbalanced when it comes to this spectrum here? I have an answer myself. I'm sure many of you have answers. Feel free to drop your own answers in the chat. My answer might surprise you. I actually blame a very specific thing. I blame pigeons. And I'll explain a little bit more, but this is the culprit here, in my opinion, about why we are so disjointed in terms of understanding and accepting failure when it comes to learning environments and designing our learning environments. So during World War II, U.S. military gave this guy $25,000 to see if he could get pigeons to guide missile systems. This was a project named Project Pigeon, and again, 25 grand, not a bad day's work. To see if I can get pigeons to somehow steer missiles long distances. The man's name was B.F. Skinner, and he actually did prove that pigeons could learn how to steer. And there's still the nose cone of one of his pigeon-guided missile systems in the American History Museum. And for those of you that probably a step ahead of me here, B.F. Skinner did go on to other things. He actually went on to become one of these pioneers of this concept of operant conditioning. And this is a lot of how he used this approach in steering pigeons and missiles and nose cones. He could show that pigeons would associate actions like push this button with some sort of reward, like get food. Here's what's really interesting, and this is where I think this connects not only to all of the things that happened in the 20th century in terms of evolutions of education, but carryovers into our current day and current understanding of training. Skinner designed these early experiments so pigeons were actually less likely to make mistakes. And so here's what you would kind of see in this Skinner box experiment. I get a button and I get nothing else. I get a stimulus here, and okay, I push the button because I got nothing else to do in this box, and I get some food. Skinner would design his experiments, so this is how this was set up, and then only very slowly after the pigeon got used to pushing the right button would he fade in these wrong answers. And so that, I think, is, again, something that should give us pause a bit and get us to recognize that this is really different than any sort of fail first environment. This is saying, here's the right answer, only focus on the right answer. I'm going to slowly introduce distractors, but I really don't want you to ever deviate from the right answer. What's interesting here is that new research is showing that even the pigeons, if they are given chances to fail first, learn faster. And we have seen this replicated in a lot of human-based studies, that when you give people really difficult scenarios, chances to fail early on, confusing questions even with no explanation until right before they get final tested, those groups actually score higher on exams, higher on retention, higher on when given new topics to cover. This is the kind of backwards thinking that we are fighting against here, and it goes against this large canon of operant conditioning and behavioralist approaches that really challenge and prohibit us from the faster learning approaches that we can do with fail first learning. Pause here again. Any questions that have come up on the chat that I've missed?
No, just a lot of good conversation. So I encourage you to continue sharing your insights as we go along. Thanks.
This is great. Yeah, I'm scrolling through here and I'm seeing these. Oh, I hope we can keep all of these chats and communications going. These are really, really cool. Excellent. All right. Well, so those of you who were first dialing into this probably are wondering at this point, where's the gamification? Like, I mean, this is very interesting in behavioral conditioning, and I got to go check out that nose cone at the
Mhm.
museum. But what does this have to do with games? The title of this talk included play. A lot of my background's in gamification. Where where are you going with this? So I got another quote to pull up here. It's not a Wayne Gretzky one, but it's just as good. I think it belongs on just as many motivational posters. For those of you that don't know, go check out Jesper Juhl, really great game designer and thinker. Um, and one of the things that was most insightful in Juhl's work for me was this realization that when we are in game environments, different from perhaps any other spot in our daily lives, we have the option of denying that game failure matters. When we're in that, if you've heard the magic circle concept, when we're in that magic circle, something happens where we are able to throw off the yokes of this, 100 years of behavioralist operant 20th century thinking that we should never be thinking about failure, and we can have fun playing. And again, what we've seen is when we allow ourselves to fail, we unlock routes to faster learning. We just need to get over that ego and that uncomfortability and that trained in fear of failing. And games are one of the best possible ways to do that. And I'll prove it to you right here. In 2014, again, this goes. I've got a lot more research into this for those that are interested. But one of the great stats when I was looking at failure rates in games, 2014, there was a game called Dark Souls 2, and really popular game. I can't remember all the different awards that it won. We might have some Dark Souls 2 players here, but they actually were able to monitor the death rates within the game, and they found out that people were dying 150,000 times per hour in that game. And during this course of measurement, that was 23 times higher than the actual death rate in the real world. So again, death and failure within games is much higher than anything else that we're experiencing in our daily lives. And again, this should drive home the point that we are incredibly loss averse when we're facing reality. I don't want to fail in my job. I don't want to fail in life. I don't want to make mistakes. There's real risks, obviously, in the real world, but we don't mind losing and learning when we play. And in fact, games really require failure. And if you are in this industry with where we're sitting today, I want to congratulate you because you are part of or adjacent to an industry in which we have had to invent a new term for death. And this might be the only time that we've done this in our human history, right? There is that concept of finitude. But for game designers, gamification experts, game based trainers, you are in an industry where we've actually had to come up with the term permadeath. And for gamers out there, you know that permadeath is different from regular death. And this is, again, the only industry I can think of where we have to make that distinction. Uh, Permadeath, for those that are interested, is a term that applies to games where they need to make players understand that death here really means it's like starting the game entirely over from scratch, unplugging your machine and starting back over. And most games don't have a permadeath option. They have a death and then go back to the last checkpoint or your respawn. And again, this speaks to the fact that death is so common and failure is so common in game-based environments that we actually have to reinvent this entire concept here. Very cool. Again, if those, thank you for those putting comments in the chat. There's some amazing insights going on in here. So if you haven't had a chance to look through these are really cool. Jenny, I love this. Yeah, great points. Great points all. Oh, I love it. Okay, I want to keep going forward, but yeah, if there are other questions that are coming up, let's keep going. I'm going to actually give you a chance to chime in on this chat here. This is another way to prove how important failure is in gamification and learning environments. And again, think about what I'm about to do for you here and think about how you can apply that maybe to your own training design or curricula. This is proof that games without failure are super boring. Let's say that I come up to you and I have a game that I want to sell you, and I say, this is my game. Will you give me $30 for this game? All you do is you push this button to win the game. Do you think I will have many takers? Spoiler alert, I've tried this. Yeah, it does not work. I'm not able to retire yet on my proceeds from the one button game. But as you can probably guess, yeah, no one's going to buy this. They're going to say that's boring, that's annoying. I'm not going to do that. So I need your help here to help commercialize my game concept. What would you do to help me make this game more commercially viable. So put your comments in the chat here. Anything that you could do to help me to make this game more fun. As people are typing, I will say this is another Jesper Joule concept, this one button game. Speed element. Yeah, make it, yeah, rewards. Maybe if I push the button, I just get some confetti coming down. Push for a chance. Oh, so randomization is a factor there. So from Jason, yeah, push the button. Most of the time, I'm not going to win, but every once in a while, on a random element, I will win. First person to push the button wins. So competition as a mechanic there. Add a puzzle. So unlock a Rubik's Cube around this button to push it. Push the button at the right time. Yep. Random intervals. Yep. Speeds. Copying. Percentage chance to failure. Yeah, you're jumping ahead and got the right answer there. Answer a question correctly. Add a puzzle. Leveling elements. Yep. Absolutely. So this 2-foot thread that just happened in our chat here, go back and mine that for gamification mechanics. There's dozens of them in there. All accurate, all viable ways to make this game more engaging. And as you can probably guess, things like levels. I've had people in past talks say put guards around the button. I've had one person say electrify the button. I don't even know what that would do, but that's all very interesting concepts. And if you zoom out, and I've seen a few people in the chats mention this already, the idea here is what we are doing is we are introducing opportunities to fail. So again, distilled down to its core element, so many of our mechanics, when you combine them with an outcome or an objective, connects to form that opportunities for failure. And that's what makes learning so much fun. If learning is without failure or without levels, we are back to our behavioralist Skinner box experiment of this is success, just keep pushing success. And I hope that you will eventually just drill that into your brain. And as we've seen, studies, research, just our own experiences with looking at a game like this, that's not how good learning happens. All right. Before we jump into some real world applications in our second half here, how are we doing on the chats? And even bigger than that, are there questions people have? And you're welcome to raise your hand. And I think Sandy can help you unmute. But are there questions that are coming to mind as we reach kind of this halfway point here?
Yeah, I haven't seen any questions, but lots of great comments, and what a creative audience to identify so many mechanics of games in just a short chat there. So
Mm-hmm.
thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Thank you.
This is yeah. I've got a great. I'm going to read this out from Aaron on the chat. How do you deal with do more with less mentality when wanting to experiment with failure? So so yes, we can meet this deadline, but I really want to try some new things, or I really want to yeah, almost to fail at this and to see how that can happen. This is a great question. Can or will failure drag out the process? I'm going to show you all a case study at the end of this that might answer that from Aaron. And I think, but I think this mentality of this fear around failure is really important to not try to walk around or not try to ignore, but to acknowledge right out in the open. So I think that's a great point, and hopefully the case study I'm going to show a little bit later will draw some attention to that. Yeah. Other questions? Looks like we're good. That was a really
Mm,
great one.
yes.
I see another couple people typing. So I may wait for a second, but yeah, I think it is. We really have to recognize the uphill battle that we're fighting when it comes to, especially when we're in industries like healthcare, legal
Mhm.
compliance. This idea where the risk is really high, and that insistence on doubling down with that behavioralist. I only want the right answer because these other buttons that you could potentially push are really scary. I don't want you to do that. How can we get around that or get through that?
It's about practicing in a safe environment, failing in a safe environment. I was rewatching the Apollo 13 movie, and they were showing the simulator where they put the astronauts
Hmm.
in the simulator, and they're going along, they're doing all the right buttons, and there's literally hundreds of buttons that they have to go in the right sequence. And then they would throw some kind of weird thing at them, and they would
Yep.
see how they react. And it's just, yeah, just being able to provide that safe environment to fail and make mistakes.
Hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely right.
Mhm.
There's a couple great points here. So from Natalie, I've got SMEs who are reluctant to expose learner to errors because we don't want to teach them how to do this the wrong way. This is a great spot, especially if we've got subject matter experts who are interested or willing to look into the research, I'll cite a couple of studies on the next screen here, but this is a great spot to show actually what the research tells us is when you have opportunities to fail, you actually learn faster. And that idea from subject matter experts of, I don't want to teach you how to do this the wrong way, really does come back to this 20th century behavioralist foundations that so many of us have been educated through. And so again, it's not a slight to any subject matter expert who has that concern, because that's very valid. That's how our entire certainly from a US perspective, American education system was built to say, just focus on the right answers. But what's so interesting now is now that we've had a chance to look back and have some longitudinal research, we really can see, oh, when we give people chances to fail, they actually don't just learn it the wrong way, they actually learn the right way faster. And a great comment here from Philip. Again, in certain industries, that can be very, one failure can mean big catastrophic events. How can you, as a L&D expert, leader in the training curriculum development space, create those safe to fail environments? So simulations, mock-ups, scenario-driven events, narrative, and again, you can see this bleeding over into gamification elements, where I'm creating this safe to fail and even fun to fail environment. These are really great. I love this chat coming in. I feel like you all have a whole great conversation going in here. I hope everyone's able to check out the chat as well. I'm going to keep moving forward, but this has been really fun. We're going to dive into, now that we've laid some foundations, we've looked at 20th century environments, we've looked at some of our backgrounds, we've looked at some of the initial seeds of research that we're starting to get people to question, wait, is this really the best way to do this? We're going to get a little more practical now, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways to bring more failure-based learning into your learning environments. And we know that these work. This is just a few. You see down in the corner here, I've cited a few of the studies. You're welcome to reach out to me. I can provide you more research. My book goes into a lot more of that research. But basically, you can look at all the research and understand the deep dive concepts of why this works, or you can do what I did when I first started getting interested in this topic and saying, oh yeah, that makes sense because this is how I play games. So when we think about increasing retention rates, engagement rates, all of those things, there are 3 key techniques that I think can help you do that. Increasing your feedback rate, decreasing your failure cost, and putting your hardest questions up front. These are challenging to do, but all somewhat manageable, I would say, in regardless of industry, regardless of your time frames, regardless of your technology capabilities. These are all things that you can be exploring pretty much in any learning scenario. And we're going to dive into each one of these, but I'm going to give you all time to process these, ask questions, think about some of your own industry examples as we get into each of them. Let's see, the value of failing. Yeah, great comments here in the chat, continuing that conversation of how do you get buy-in. Asking your own subject matter experts and leadership to think about these 3 techniques can be a really helpful way to do this. And again, here's some examples that we'll get into. So first one, increasing your feedback rate. Anyone know what the screen comes from? I hope so, at least. This is like the throwback to, yeah, Super Mario, exactly. I love it. Yes, the just penultimate screen, or the ultimate screen of my youth here. Very first screen and very first level of Super Mario Brothers, right? Okay, next question here. If I was to do nothing on this screen as this game was starting, I'm sitting down to my Nintendo and I'm about to play this, how long would it take before I know that I've lost this game or gotten some element of feedback? How long would it take me to get feedback here? 6 seconds. Yep, it's Rich. Rachel's played this before too. Yeah. So if I start this game, yeah, there is just seconds between me starting, doing nothing, and me getting eaten up, knocked off the screen by this Goomba guy here. And so that idea of instant feedback, 6 seconds, 5 seconds to get to feedback is so important to this gamification element. And again, not something that you have to be an adult to deal with. In fact, kids could recognize that the value of that instant immediate feedback is one of the most helpful, engaging things that we could possibly do. Now, let's remove ourselves from this, halcyon days of our youth and think about current days in our learning and development industry, how long between a learner's absorption of knowledge, facts, skills, and the feedback that they're getting, whether or not they're doing those skills well or not, are we taking on average? How long is that feedback in our learning environments? Is it 6 seconds for anyone? 30 minutes? Yeah, maybe if we're lucky, too long. Yeah, I think back to my college teaching days, and it was terrible, right? It's go to 3 months of lectures, and then we'll do a midterm maybe.
Mhm.
Terrible. Like that, the idea of stretching out that amount of feedback for that long before learners know how they're doing is it's a travesty. And when we think about game environments, all of these things are feedback that I can experience within seconds of starting this game. Some of them will kill me, some of them will reward me. All of these different things are levels of feedback and ways of feedback to get me learning and practicing. Yeah, and look at our industry examples here. 30 minutes to an hour, right? That's pretty common for especially most of these virtual learning environments. We don't have the instant feedback that is associated and connected to higher learning rates. So one of the first things you can do to think about redesigning or improving your own curriculum is, how do I get feedback faster? Um, Think about your LMS and authoring tools even. Sometimes they're only built to give feedback at the end of a whole quiz. Other systems are designed to give feedback after each question. That difference in speed can be really helpful and important for, again, ramping that up to get learners their feedback faster. All right, increasing the feedback rates. I'm trying to scroll back through any other comments or questions on this. Yeah,
I
more just
th
kind of commiserating. Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's great. Yeah, they're just, um, yeah, feeling the life there as a training professional.
Yeah, I love this from Tamara, right? Sometimes you never get feedback. Yeah, and it's just like, oh
Right.
my gosh, like how
Mhm.
often? And I've certainly been guilty of this in designing courses in the past. Oh, well, I don't want to hurt your feelings, or I don't want to show you how bad you're doing early on. I'm just not going to show, not going to tell you. What a disservice I'm doing to my learners by doing that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, decreasing failure costs. Next key technique here. So nothing super fancy with this. You can kind of see the standard game over screen. Nearly every game is going to have some element of this. Um, but look at my cost of replaying here. Nearly every game is going to want you to start playing again immediately, right? So what do I have to do to start playing the game? I got to push X. Simplest, easiest cost for me to overcome is just my own little millisecond of motivation to go, yeah, I want to do this again. Um, how often does this happen in learning environments? And again, if for people that are willing to share, put in the chat here. How often do you let people retake a quiz? How often, how often are those automated retaking features built into your LMS or your quizzing tools? I know sometimes a program will be limited to, oh, you only get one retry. Um, and again, very guilty myself for building courses that either have just one, or when I've taught academia, sorry, you failed the final, you have to wait until next semester to take the course. How depressing is that to have a motivated learner who wants to jump back in and to tell them, sorry, you're not going to do this yet. Retake until you pass. Yeah, great to have that, but then this awareness that, like, oh, but the quiz is too easy. What would happen if we are in that kind of more perceptual learning model machine of, here's a cockpit, you have no idea what you're looking at, you're gonna you're gonna fail this first quiz, but get back in there. There's no cost to play again.
It's interesting. It makes me think about certification courses in the industry that I work in. There's a very high cost to retest. And
Yeah.
so that's a problem. So people just give up and they
Yep.
don't become certified.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm seeing a lot of this similarly in the chats here, right? Yeah, we only yeah, only allowed 2 retakes. And for those that are saying unlimited, kudos to you, not only for having the platforms that allow that, but the learning culture and the coverage from your subject matter experts and your stakeholders to say, yes, if we have people that are willing to learn and try again, why would we not? Why would we want to limit them from that? And I like Natalie's talking about pretest. We're going to get to that in our next tip here. But that idea of how willing are we to throw those questions out at the front and support learners in a way, either through our design by gamifying something to make it engaging so they don't feel bad when they lose, or in our learning culture to say, I don't expect you to get this right, and you might feel really crummy or you might feel bad. Don't. It's okay. This is a safe environment. We want you to fail in the training world so you don't have to worry about getting out there into the real world and not know what to do. So yeah, decreasing the failure cost. And again, think about what this might mean for your own programs. Oftentimes this means diving into the actual authoring tools and figuring out what can I do to increase my retake amounts. But think about, yeah, how often I'm offering something from a certification perspective. Can I speed up my process or decrease the cost of wanting to sign back up or wanting to do this again? Again, we want to think about, if we've got learners motivated or engaged to do this again, how can we lower this barrier as much as possible? Culture shifts. Yep, absolutely. All right, so two out of our three techniques done here. Our last one here, one of my favorites, put the hardest questions up front. And again, this will typically fly in the face of how most of us do course design, as we defer to much more of that stair-stepped. I want to start you off easy. I want to then kind of maybe introduce a couple of challenges and then go back to easy again and maybe another couple more distractors, and I want to work my way up. And I think the fear, again, justifiably comes from, I don't want to overtax my learners. I don't want to overstress them out. Anyone recognize what this screen is from? Doom, yeah, Doom 2. Uh, good guesses on some of the other 90s games. Yeah, this is Doom 2. I think this was 93. I don't see this in too many games. I think it's more common now. But Doom 2, if you ever played it, it had a mode called Nightmare Mode. And so there was easy, there was medium, there was hard, and then there was nightmare mode. And if you selected nightmare mode, the screen came up that said, are you sure the skill level isn't even remotely fair? And I just loved that. Stuck with me, even just as a kid. But what I loved is this idea of bringing this into learning environments, and how cool would it be if we have learners that are so motivated to take a course that we are having to pause hold them back and say, hey, I know you're super excited, but are you sure you want to do this? I'm not even going to be remotely fair to you. I'm going to throw everything in the kitchen sink your way and try to get you into this. I'm glad that, yeah, we've got the cheat codes there from the Doom players. Yes, good throwbacks. So again, how different is this from most of our typical learning environments when we're scared of, I don't want to discourage my learners. I don't want to get them to just exit out of this if this is too difficult. And how willing are you, or is your organization, to start amping up this difficulty, or at least giving the option of having learners challenge themselves? I think the option of pre-testing is great. Again, not trying to shy away from the difficult pre-tests. Rather than making them super easy, just jump over the hurdle and be done. I'm going to give you the hardest questions in your life to think about HIPAA or patient privacy. I'm going to challenge you to think like a legal doctor mind, and give you the most impossible, challenging, ambiguous questions to try and answer. We might think that scares off learners. It turns out learners get really interested in that. I have a story I tell in my book where this is really depressing for me, but I remember, gosh, second, third grade, very early on in my life, deciding that I wasn't going to do math I was not going to pursue math. And my reasoning that made sense in my brain back then is, my teacher already knows the answers to these math questions. Why would I even try it? Like, there's nothing new to be discovered here. And I kind of thought math was like geography, where it's like, well, we already mapped the whole world. Why would I want to go explore anything? And it wasn't until undergraduate level, maybe, again, where I'd kind of like, stopped studying math for years, that I realized there were unsolved math problems. There were problems that existed, and I think there's like 7 famous ones, these unsolvable math problems. And how cool would it be to teach math to children, saying, there are questions out there that haven't been solved yet. You could be the first one to solve them. And this is, again, that nightmare mode challenge of yeah, you'll have to learn some of the basic math in order to get there, but let's put the hardest questions up front and engage that sense of challenge and opportunity to unlock deeper levels of learning. All right. Let's see. I'm looking at the chat here. Do you recommend tough questions up front as a pretest, and if they nail it, they don't have to take the rest of the course? Um, I think that's one way to do it, and it depends on. I know there's lots of different hurdles you have to go through. Sometimes certification, or an annual retake for something like HIPAA that anyone in the healthcare industry has to go through every year. That sort of test out might be a great opportunity. One of the other things that I like to think about, and this is a great question, Jody. When I try to connect tough questions and succeeding in tough questions, rather than just having that be a, hey, great, here's your early exit door, take off. Are there other things that I could do to create a sense of reward while still engaging the learner in the course? So if you pass this really insanely hard pretest, and you pass through it, instead of just saying thanks, goodbye, you now advance to a stage of being a peer reviewer, or you are now the one writing the next set of challenging questions. To me, I love that idea of connecting the reward to something that is looped back within the curriculum, rather than just saying, all right, great job, back to work for you. And again, that's if I have the time and I have the right curriculum for that. Looping the learners back in, even the ones that are kind of the expert level, is a great way to advance your own curriculum. Yeah, really, really great. I love this chat thing going on here. All right, so those are our three key tips for gamifying and introducing failure-based environments. I did want to talk very briefly on a case study, and then I know we're coming closer to time, and so I want to make sure I've got enough time for Q&A as well, and do drop those in the chats. But a while back, someone had mentioned this idea of like, how do you engage stakeholders if you've got a corporate culture that really is hesitant around failure. And again, I've worked in healthcare. I know that compliance-based training has got a lot of that kind of nervousness around failure. My biggest encouragement is don't give up, or don't use that as a chance to ignore the failure-based tracking and the benefits that we can see. So I'll talk really quickly about a training curriculum that I built, where I promised myself I was going to totally track and own up to any failures that were happening here. So this was it was for a healthcare company. So again, already a kind of lockdown industry. They wanted a onboarding curriculum built very quickly for some call center folks, and in good kind of backwards design material. We decided that we wanted to see a decrease in call escalations as the ultimate target behavior. Designed a pretty typical distance learning program, and the results kind of filtered in a 1, 2, 3, 4 progression, as they often do. So learners took the course. It was a hard course. It challenged them a lot. And when I asked them how they liked the course, my results were fine, but not great. And for those that do trainings day in, day out, I know we all kind of come to expect the high survey results, that if I'm, I want to be at like a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and anything below that makes me start to wonder, did they not like my cat gifts, or was I not telling good jokes in the training? What is it? Why don't they like me as a person? This level 1 reaction score, yeah, rose a couple of warning flags for me. Those escalated a bit more when I saw my final exam results. And so again, learners got the kind of standard pre-post test, and in that final exam, average was kind of a mid-C level. So yeah, we all of a sudden I was doubting all of my own philosophies and research here. Is, oh my gosh, people didn't like this, they were grumpy at the course, and they're not doing so great in the final exam here. Am I gonna have a difficult conversation with my stakeholders and have to own up to the fact that this wasn't a well-designed course? What was interesting here is I promised myself that I wanted to not just take these metrics at, kind of that typical operant conditioning level of, I guess this was a failure because people keep getting mistakes. I found a way to track behaviors on the job day in, day out. And the best way we found to do that was to look at the questions that these new call center folks were asking as they got out on the floor and started having these customer conversations. And we tracked them, individually, one at a time, not only who was asking them, but how many they were how many questions were being asked, and more importantly, who was answering those questions. And here's what we saw, and this is where there was this, ray of light, light at the end of the tunnel, kind of awareness of, you know what, we might be okay. Because what we saw is people got their training in week one, and as you can probably guess, they get thrown out. They maybe have lower confidence because of how they did on the final exam. They get thrown out onto the floor, and they're asking a lot of questions every day. Um, what I was also tracking during this time was who was answering these questions. Our subject matter experts, who were kind of doing a lot of the overhead oversight, escalating, answering, versus the peers who had a chance to also answer their teammates' questions. And after this kind of initial crush of, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm a little nervous, we actually start to see this big change in behavior on the job of who's able to answer the questions that are coming through. And this idea of creating by, 20 days in to a course, the sea change between the experts being the ones answering the questions and the peers being able to answer their own questions or each other's questions is a great on the job behavior that we realized, and I was able to convince to my stakeholders, is worth the discomfort of a final exam that sits around a C level, or a reaction survey that doesn't crack the top 90%. And we realized that we'd much rather be okay with these lower level one, level two scores if we can see this change in on the job behaviors and the saving of our experts' time, this decreasing of overall questions as people get into the system and get very comfortable. And then probably the biggest result we saw, most important result I would say, is our target goal of decreasing call escalations by, I think it was 20% in 3 6 months or whatever. We got 17% in the first month. And so we were able to really show that as long as we're okay as training designers in being slightly less than perfect in our level one, level two scores, we can actually see some great on the job results, as people allow themselves to fail, step in, dust themselves off, help each other out, and get more comfortable with that. All right, I will pause. I know that was a pretty quick overview of just one case study, but are there other questions that are coming to mind for folks?
Yes, and again, you are welcome to raise your hand. I can activate your mic and you can come on mic and have a conversation with Scott. We do have Jody asking, did you exceed the 20% target in the following
We
weeks?
did, yes, yeah. I would say the
Nice.
most dramatic
Mhm.
was that
Great.
first month. But yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. This kind of brings me back to watching Apollo 13 again when the whole technical team was, really upset at thinking that they failed, and they're working on the solution to get these astronauts back to Earth. And the head guy said, I think you're wrong. This isn't about failure. We're going to show them this is our finest hour,
Mhm.
right? And so
Yep.
it's kind of like with I don't know how you do that in especially highly regulated areas where, failure is not an option. There are high costs
Mhm.
to failure in a highly regulated environment.
Yeah.
And so, yes, and I know a lot of people here work for those kinds of environments, but
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. The more guardrails we can put up within our
Mhm.
training world of,
Yeah.
this is the most important spot for you to fail. I want to create those,
Mhm.
VR, surgery environments that you can kind of practice inserting the
Exactly.
needle at the right
Yeah.
moment. Those elements and that ability to try and get it wrong 1,000 times, not just one time, and have the low cost to retrying while it's safe is one of the most important things that you can do.
Mhm.
There's
Now
a great point from Sherry here. Yeah. Do you want to improve level one and two, or do you want to accept that we're not there yet? I would even say, as a third option, I've started to now think that aiming for mid 70s to mid 80s in my level one and two actually might be that sweet spot. And I haven't done enough kind of side by side studies that have the same control environments to be able to show that.
Mhm.
But my working hypothesis right now is if I'm seeing 100% here and 100% there, I'm probably going to see poorer on the job results because I'm not been challenging my learners and not been giving them enough opportunities to failure. So,
Right.
for those that are interested in, or have potential, side by side studies we can track, I'd love to explore that more. Can we see faster on the job results like this the more we kind of aim for that, happy medium of just discomforting enough to get you engaged?
Right. Now, Chuck, I did activate your mic. You're welcome to look at the top of the screen and click on the mic icon. How are you, Chuck? And you
There we
might have
go.
to
Now it's green.
Yeah, yeah,
There
there
we
you
go.
go. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good,
So,
good.
Scott, quick question for you. Failure generally triggers a negative emotional response in the person who's
Mhm.
failed at whatever it is. Have you come up with any suggestions, or do you have any ideas for how to ameliorate that response? How to help people understand that it's okay to fail in this particular instance, in this particular circumstance, and you're not going to be penalized?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a great
Mhm.
point. I would certainly say that one of the best ways we can do it, a couple of things. When we fail, there's that knee jerk reaction of I should have known that, or maybe it's even like shame based response of everyone's going to laugh at me for thinking that. A couple ways you could think about ameliorating that. One, I think the more we can gamify environments, and when I say gamify in this sense, I mean the ability to introduce play, laughter, humor. It's easier for me to laugh off a silly attempt or a silly answer when I am playing in a Jeopardy environment, or in a game where I see a funny sound effect when my wrong answer sends the character careening off the edge. That's the easiest way to, I think, kind of switch off that circuit of, oh, this was a bad thing. The other thing when I think about social learning theory is, failing in front of a group, very different than failing individually 100 times by myself, when I can just repeat that answer and not have to worry about going up on the leaderboard. So a couple of things to think about when we want to kind of get around that sense of failure is bad, or I'm going to be laughed at or embarrassed in front of all of my peers here. Great question, though.
Yes, yes. I'm going to go ahead and change the layout real quickly before Scott closes our session. Look at the right-hand side. There, I changed the pod there. It says, "What's the best or most useful idea that you learned today?" You can continue chatting in the center pod, and then I also put a link into chat. If you click on that, that's going to show you the bonus items that were provided by ELB Learning, our sponsor today. So, Scott, I'm going to give you the last word today.
Well, I just wanted to thank everyone again for joining in. There's just a wealth of great insights in this chat, and so I'm eager to go back through myself and look through all of
Hmm.
those. Um, I've got you'll see it in the slide deck that was shared out, but I've got my email address, and so if anyone's interested in getting more of these resources or wanted to ask a question just one-on-one, again, speaking of that kind of fear of jumping up in front of a group, happy to take things offline and talk more. But yeah, I'm just really looking forward to continuing the conversation. And thanks again, Sandy, for having me.
Thank you so much, Scott. And thank you to our sponsor, ELB Learning. Check them out at elblearning.com. And we're going to keep this room open for just a moment. I will stop the recording now.